I wasn't supposed to reach anyone, not with those words. After my fiancé died, I kept texting his number, late at night. Grief, regret, love, I never said out loud. I thought the messages vanished into nothing, but they didn't. A stranger was reading them. And then something strange happened. My words began reaching him at the exact moments he needed them most. One night I typed, almost without thinking, "Don't leave yet." He slowed down, looking at the message, and in that pause, a car flew past the crossing. If he'd kept walking, he might not have made it home. Am I the one who saved him? Could my words really shape his life? I didn't know it then, but the stranger reading my messages was the man fate was guiding me to, the man who would change my life forever. I lived an ordinary life. I worked long hours. I rushed through mornings. I dreamed about weekends. And at the center of it all was him. He wasn't just my fiancé. He was my anchor, my witness. My favorite argument and my safest place. We planned trips we hadn't taken, argued about furniture we couldn't afford, laughed about names for kids we didn't have yet. He had this way of making the mundane feel important. We could spend an hour choosing a loaf of bread or arguing about movies, and it felt like an adventure. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And then, without warning, it wasn't. He was gone. A car accident, one of those ordinary nights that suddenly shatters everything. The night he died, everything I thought I was collapsed. I wasn't the same woman I had been. I was just the space he left behind. That's when the messages began. Not because I believed in ghosts, fate, or second chances, but because I didn't know how else to keep breathing. Every night I would text his number, confessions, regrets, pieces of love still looking for a place to land. I told him about the songs I couldn't listen to anymore, about the shirts I kept folded in the drawer just to feel close to him, about how angry I was at the world for moving forward when mine had stopped. I thought those words dissolved into nothing, but I was wrong. Someone was listening. At first, it was subtle. A text I sent about the rain. And he told me later it started pouring right outside his window. Coincidence, I thought. Just timing. But then, there were moments that felt different. One night I wrote, "Go home early tonight." The next day, he told me that for some reason he listened, and when he got back, his neighbor's apartment had caught fire. If he hadn't been there, the smoke would have spread into his place. Another time I wrote, "Call her back." He did, and found his sister in tears, waiting for someone to answer. He told me later that call changed everything between them. These weren't coincidences anymore. My words were in his life, guiding him, protecting him. But I still didn't know who he was. Not yet. Weeks later, fate shifted again. A friend begged me to attend a small gathering. I almost said no, but something in me, maybe loneliness, maybe fate, said yes. That's where I met him. Not through a screen, not through messages, but standing there across the room. The room was a small rectangle of yellow light, brick walls, plants drooping from high shelves, a table of mismatched glasses sweating into paper napkins. He stood near the window like someone who likes exits but isn't planning to use them. A friend waved me over. Someone made a joke about the weather, pretending to be dramatic. I laughed for the first time in weeks and heard my own voice like it belonged to a stranger. He said, "I'm terrible at these things." I said, "Me too." We stood there, two bad minglers finding the only conversation we could keep up with. We started talking about simple things at first, work, books, music, but it felt easy, as if I'd known him longer than a few minutes. He told me he organizes his books by mood, not author. I admitted I judge strangers' dogs by their names. We negotiated custody over olives we hadn't ordered yet. Tiny threads, nothing urgent, and yet each one found a place to tie. When he laughed, something in me loosened. When he listened, I felt heard in a way I hadn't in years. He didn't fill silences to make them behave. He let them breathe until they softened. When I reached for a word, he didn't finish the sentence. He waited like someone holding out both hands and letting me choose which to take. I didn't recognize him as the stranger who had been holding my words. Not yet. But that night, as I walked home, I caught myself smiling, and for the first time since the accident, I felt something other than grief. We met for coffee the next day, just for 20 minutes. It turned into 2 hours. He ordered something simple. I ordered something I couldn't pronounce. He teased me for it, gently, the way you tease someone you already like. We talked about smaller lives we once imagined for ourselves, the job he almost took in a different city, the trip I kept postponing. He said he likes to sit by the window and count dogs on rainy days. I admitted I hoard books I don't finish and pick them up years later, like apologies. We walked after that, no agenda, just sidewalks and side streets, turning left when the map said right. He pointed out a tiny courtyard I'd passed 100 times and never seen, with a stone fountain and a tree that looked like it had learned to bow. We didn't talk about fate. We talked about the right kind of umbrella and the wrong kind of pizza, and the way cities feel different at 4 p.m. than they do at 4 a.m. That night, he called me just to say goodnight. We stayed on the line without speaking for a while, the gentle kind of silence that doesn't ask for anything. Before we hung up, he said, "Sleep well." I didn't, not really, but I lay there smiling in the dark, counting breaths instead of memories. Days found a new rhythm. Wednesday evenings at a bookstore that smelled like paper and thunderclouds, reading first pages aloud and guessing endings we knew were wrong. Sunday walks by the river, letting the city pass like a long exhale. Coins flipped into fountains with no wishes attached, just the sound of water catching metal and saying, "Stay a moment." And in the small spaces between plans, something living grew, not a replacement for what I lost, but a room the loss could sit in without owning the house. We kept seeing each other, coffee, long walks, late-night conversations. We built rituals without naming them, Wednesday bookstores, Sunday riversides, a table in the back of a diner where time slowed down. When a street musician played the same song twice in a row, we called it a loop in the universe, and left him a note that said, "Thank you for holding time still." He told me about his life, the pain he carried, the regrets, the close calls that had shaken him. And every story felt familiar. I could feel the edges of an answer pressing in, the way a word sits on your tongue before it becomes sound. He'd say, "I don't know why I checked the window." And I'd remember typing, "Open the window. The air will help." He'd say, "I turned back for my keys." And my fingers would remember that old message, "Don't forget your keys." Nothing dramatic, just threads pulled taut across days, quietly guiding us to the same point on the map. Twice I almost told him. Once, outside the bookstore with the creaky step. Once, when the kettle shrieked in my kitchen, and we both laughed at how loud it felt. Both times I said, "There's something I should," and both times the moment closed, like a window caught by a breeze. Not secrets, just timing. And then timing spoke for itself. One evening, he described a night when he stopped at a crossing, paused for just a second to read a message. And in that pause, a car flew past. My heart stopped because I knew that moment, I knew that message. It was mine. The man sitting across from me wasn't just someone I'd met by chance. He was the stranger who had been reading my words all along. We didn't interrogate the magic. We let it be ordinary enough to live with. He looked at me like a memory arriving early and didn't ask for proof. He simply nodded, slow, as if his heart had known before his mind. "I don't know what any of this means," I said. "Maybe it means," he answered, "we were meant to meet twice, first in words, and then for real." We sat there letting the truth find its shape between us. It didn't feel like thunder. It felt like finally calling something by its name. And in that instant, everything made sense. The messages weren't just grief. They were a thread of fate, tying me to him until we found each other. I thought my texts were letters to the past, but they were building a bridge to my future. Every warning, every whisper, every line I sent into the dark was guiding him and guiding me. Not back to the man I had lost, but forward to the man I was meant to find. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't chance. It was destiny. Because grief doesn't just break us. Sometimes it carries us exactly where we were always meant to go.